I've got... No, we're not supposed to be hosting State of Decay on Twitch right now. But that's what it thinks I'm doing. Quit doing this. It keeps coming up. It must be something with Restream.
I have us streaming on my channel.
Well, we might as well start because, good grief, this is not exactly...
Let me see if it's making noise over my channel. 1 second.
Justice warrior.
Well, we might as well start.
Someone who cares. Someone who abhors it.
Okay, yes, it is getting the audio.
You know what I'm going to do? Just because, since you have the audio, you have the video up.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know what the problem is here. Since you have the audio. But what I'm going to do is put it into my channel through...
Hello, everyone.
Hi, everyone. This is the Sinister Porpoise. We're having some interesting problems on my end, which is weird because I don't feel like an IT person. All right, we're going to add this up on my channel soon. As soon as I get it up, and we'll be streaming. All we need is a browser source. Add the source. Add new source. Add the source.
Okay, now it's echoing.
Yes, it is, because it should be. Add the source.
Okay, now it's echoing.
All right, that should be better. Is it echoing anymore? Yes, it is, because it should be. Add the source.
Okay, now it's echoing.
Still? Echoing anymore? Yes, it is, because it should be. Add the source.
Okay, now it's echoing.
Still? Anymore? Yes, it is, because it should be. Add the source.
Okay, now it's echoing. It's like one of those... It's like one of those music loops. I'm not laughing at you. I promise.
I really hate Streamlab. I don't even know why it just decided to crash. That's the worst thing. No, I don't want you. I just want you to game capture, add source, add existing source. It's gonna echo. Add existing source. That was not what I wanted you to do. We just capture any full screen application. And there we go.
Look out! Boom, boom, boom.
Another one bites the dust. Now, everyone, we should be live. There should be no echo. Alanis will let me know if he is. For those of you who don't know me, I am the Sinister Porpoise. We're streaming on both channels. This is the Atheist T-Girl, and they really shouldn't have earned their IT degree after what's going on tonight. So
there's three of us on the video.
Well, oh, that's just my full screen. So we're in a Zoom meeting. I'll let that go because I don't want to mess with it anymore.
So you going to start the video?
Yep, start the video. This is the 8 Commandments of Social Justice Warriors. And you might want to full screen it. I don't know if there's a better software application than OBS, but
I see a gray screen.
that's on. Is that on my end or yours?
That's on your end.
Oh, right. I need to start the video. All right, come on. Oh. I'm on the wrong one. There we go.
yell at other rich white people while denouncing both richness and white.
All right, we need to start over from the beginning.
What is a social justice warrior? It's someone who cares, someone who abhors inequality, someone who wants to bring the world together. Statistically, it's a rich white person who likes to yell at other rich white people while denouncing both richness and whiteness.
So basically, a social justice warrior is your own personal Jesus. Let me know when you want to interrupt this. But
he sounds like that guy who used to be on Family Guy, the black guy who moved off to go away and then came back.
Cleveland.
He sounds like Cleveland.
Yeah, sounds a little more white than Cleveland, but yeah.
I know, but when he was talking about rich white people.
Well, I was going to say, if anyone wants to read this in Cleveland's voice, go ahead and do so. But we're going to continue now.
As a recently indoctrinated social justice warrior myself, allow me to spread our good word to your eyes and ears, and if you click away from this video, you're a bigot. Commandment 1. Thou shalt categorize all group majorities as tyrannical oppressors, except thine own. Life is an endless war between the haves and whatever anyone.
All right, go ahead.
Except you do cause your own as tyrannical oppressors. If you're a white person who's a social justice warrior, you acknowledge that white people are tyrannical and that you are part of the same issue and that you're trying to work towards resolving it, but without change, you are part of the issue.
Moo ha 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 ha! The evil tranny shall take over everything.
And I really wish it said, majorities as a Tyrannosaurus oppressors. That would be a lot funner.
Was I not supposed to reveal the Globo Homo agenda or whatever they're calling the gay agenda now that soon?
No.
But no, this is a misunderstood sociological argument that's basically taken out of context on Tumblr. Having white privilege doesn't mean that you don't have things tough. It just means that if there is someone in a marginalized group in a similar situation, they will have things tougher than you because you belong to the in-group. Now, I realize sociology really isn't that great of a course for many people to take, but some people really could use a basic sociology course.
Oh, and the other thing I got to point out is he says we have 8 commandments, so we're basically better than the Bible. It took him 10, and 4 of them was him talking about why he's so good.
Well, I was going to say... Well, technically, there are 613 commandments in the Bible, and as an ex-Mormon, I have extra books of scripture I have to deal with.
That's lots of commandments.
Has, if other people don't, it's a result of inequality, and in most cases, large-scale theft. To be a social justice warrior is to see the world as a battlefield of privilege and conquest, and all those who come out on top as bloodthirsty tyrants who will do anything to stay in power.
That's more capitalism.
Well, it's also conflict theory, which is another sociological concept that's being taken out of context. But yeah, this is essentially correct. The haves and have-nots have been an ongoing battle, and the haves will basically do anything to keep their having stuff. Yes, I realize I just sounded like Noel Plum, objectively terrible human being, and I don't care if he hears me say that. But... Go ahead.
I don't know who Noel Plum is. Is he like Veruca Salt's kid?
He is kind of, I'm not a liberal, but if you remember Rationality Rules going on about transgender women and how they're ruining women's sports.
Yes.
He has done a few videos on Rationality Rules' side, and recently he took on Soros the Skeptic in a video.
Oh, well, I hope Soros kicked his butt.
Well, Soros did the video first, and Noel Plum did it later.
Ah.
But yes, capitalism does cause this, but right now I don't even think we have capitalism. We have a corporatocracy ruled by corporations.
I haven't heard that one before.
But I think I'm the only one who's insisting that we live in a cyberpunk dystopia.
Well, I don't have any body implants yet, so it can't be a cyberpunk dystopia.
Corporations are running everything, and I can hack them. The only thing that's missing is cybernetics that you can get on your own if you have enough money. It's coming, though.
The United States is roughly 60% white. Therefore, 60% of the United States is oppressing the other 40% made up of marginalized minority groups who are struggling to succeed in a white supremacist society, called such because majority and supremacy are two words that mean the exact same thing according.
Citation needed.
I think if you were to look at the top 1%, you would find that it's more than 60% white compared to other things, and that's a result of the fact that it has been white for a long time, and you're getting a little scared that it's changing.
Well, the thing is, marginalized group doesn't necessarily mean a minority. It means a group that doesn't have power. In this context, women, for example, are considered to be a marginalized group, even though probably they make up slightly more of the population than men, because women on average live longer than men and the men die out sooner. It's just simple biology on that. Even though for every 53 boys born, there are 50 girls born. The reason for that is the Y chromosome weighs less under normal circumstances, so we get more boys coming out of the wombs than we get girls. But the girls live longer. And also, a lot of these marginalized groups, including the evil trannies that are talking to you here, are also white. Yep, still white, even though it's summer. I mean, I'm more than willing to be a tyrant, though, if you'll just let me.
That would be fun.
I personally favor the type of government where there's me and then there's the working class. But no one else seems to like that idea.
I've often thought that, if they just put me in charge of everything would get better, because I would be able to tell everyone what to do. But
well, it would certainly be better for you, wouldn't it? And maybe it would be better for other people. And you certainly couldn't do worse than the gigantic orange buffoon currently ruling the country.
According to our SJW dictionary. And by marginalized minority groups, we mean everybody except Asians. Social justice warriors don't like Asians. More on that later.
What?
But despite our hatred of majority...
You really said Asians.
That's new to me. What?
New to me.
Yeah,
go ahead,
okay.
sorry.
Let's see what he has to say about that. That one is new to me.
Majorities that exist outside our realm of control. Majorities we do control are just fine and dandy, like school administrators and professors in universities who lean overwhelmingly to our side. This is an acceptable majority, though, because it's a majority of people who share or at least don't oppose the social justice agenda. And if the world was 100% attuned to our ideologies with zero dissent, that would be terrific. And isn't that the...
Would it really, though? I mean, no ideology works perfectly. Even in the places that you would consider socialist or communist countries, they don't have pure communism. China, in fact, had to go to a more free market system because pure communism wasn't working. And that's why China is a major trade power as well as the lower wages. Now, you can argue that the power of free trade is keeping the US and China at peace because the US gives China a lot of food, but that has nothing to do with what you're saying, I think, and I'm not sure where you're going here. Anything to add?
Not on that one, no.
The real dream? To finally put an end to tyranny by instituting our own? After all, like socialism, real tyranny hasn't been tried yet. Commandment 2.
Wait, what? Real tyranny hasn't been tried yet?
I thought it was real socialism hasn't been tried yet, is what we generally say.
Where has real tyranny never been tried? I'm pretty sure it has happened everywhere. For heaven's sakes, run afoul of a cop and you'll get petty tyranny if you just do something the wrong cop doesn't like.
Thou shalt create a hierarchy of skin colors and put the darkest at the top. What are humans if not just bags of skin walking the earth? Our
tribal apes.
Species is wretched. It destroys the planet it inhabits and hunts or tortures the other creatures of the world. From an outside perspective, we are parasitic overlords who collectively drain the life from our immediate surroundings. So it makes sense to judge ourselves on the surface by no more than what we can visibly see. To do otherwise would be to give credence to the idea that humans are individuals, regardless of their appearance and categorizations. A dangerous game, to be sure. Individuals are...
There is still the belief that humans are individuals, but you can be as individual as you want, and if you're in a society that's oppressing people of your color, you're still going to have a hard time, no matter how individual you are.
If this person is really trying to not see color, I commend him from that idea, but it's not realistic. If you look at a person, the first thing you're going to notice is probably gender and the color of their skin. Humans are evolutionarily pretty much hardwired to distrust people who are different from them.
Mm-hmm.
We have gotten better about this over the years, but we really don't have this hierarchy you think. In this case, it's just because the white Europeans happened to colonize most of the world, and of course, if you look at some of the things that are going on in Africa, they're still being pretty much exploited for no good reason other than someone wants diamonds or something like that.
Yeah.
And our policy in the Middle East makes no sense. I mean,
it does make
Sorry, go ahead.
sense. It does make sense. Our policy in the Middle East is to keep the gas as low as possible.
Yes, keep the gas prices as low as possible. Have you ever seen Dune?
No, I haven't.
Read the book?
No.
The spice is the perfect metaphor for oil because it's necessary for space travel. Because they can't have space travel without it. It only exists on one desert planet. And a religious fanatic basically takes the supply of spice over. And by the way, if you haven't read Dune, it's an excellent book.
I've read some other stuff by Frank Herbert. I just haven't read that one.
You have to read that. That's his masterpiece. It's a multi-layered novel. I recommend it, but if you watch the 80s movie, which is bad, it's good because it's bad, it's not really a good treatment of the book, though.
I've only seen part of the 80s movies that had some kids with glowing eyes and some guy who blew up into a giant balloon or something like that.
Yeah, that was Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, the villain, So, which hierarchy of skin color should we put at the top? I think, in honor of Pastor Tom McMurtry, we should put pumpkins at the top.
But then that would put Trump there.
I said pumpkins, not orange. Because I don't know what... Trump's skin color is not naturally orange. That's the difference.
Are harder to corral and shepherd towards what we tell them salvation is. It's much easier to reduce them to collective hive minds based on the color of their skin, so we can lead them as one massive unit towards what we decide is best for them. Such is the rationale of the social justice warrior, who links the idea of minorities to the idea of victimhood, where if you don't succeed in life as a minority, it's because you're a minority. It's not your fault you were born the way you are. It's society's fault for failing to accommodate whatever terrible individual qualities you may have. You're a victim of an oppressive system designed to exclude you because of your race. But don't worry, just take my hand, and I will carry you to the promise.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
A gray box popped up in front of the screen. It's gone now.
That was probably me.
Yeah, it's back. Now it's gone.
That was probably me fixing something on my end because my system has been weird all night.
Land without you having to earn a goddamn thing because of your race. For you see, the answer to supposed racial injustice is definitively racial justice. Are you doing poorly in school? It's because your teacher's probably racist. So here, have a scholarship on us. We could have given it to this Asian
is not how it works.
But so many of them are smart anyway. Who cares if a couple of them run it?
All right, first of all, let's cover this affirmative action thing. Yes, I'm not going to engage with your argument that it is technically a form of racism, because it is favoring one race over another. But what you're missing is the context, which is why they're doing it. Affirmative action is trying to address systemic biases. And by systemic, I don't mean people are actually racist, I just mean we all have subconscious biases. So we may hire people who look more like us because, as I said earlier, humans are tribal apes, and we don't want to hire as much people who don't look like us, even if they're qualified. So what affirmative action does is try to make sure the hiring of a corporation in a certain area is not too discriminatory against certain groups. Does it work well? Well, there are problems with it, as there are with anything, but if you have a better solution, tell me, because this is the best one we found so far.
I'm looking at a Harvard study right now. It's not exactly racism, but sexism, and talking about how orchestras are starting to use blind auditions for female members or everyone. Instead of having a person come out on the stage in front of everyone and play, they will have them behind a. You okay?
Yeah, sorry, my headphone needs replaced.
They'll put them behind a curtain and have them play. And it found that when they do that, more women get hired.
All right, everyone, you've seen the problems with curly hair.
And what's even makes it even more amazing is the first time they tried it, they still weren't getting women hired until they realized that there was a hardwood floor that people were walking on, and you could tell if it was a man or woman because the woman would have to wear heels to the orchestra, and you could hear the difference in the walk. Once they put down a carpet for them to walk in on, the number of females being hired was raised.
See, if we can find ways to make our hiring blind, which actually does happen with many online jobs, this might not be a problem. But the thing is, even in online areas, there are still signifiers of race, even though it's not perfect, that may cause discrimination. It's like, if I apply to some job with my given name, or with the name like, pick a name, I don't want to sound too, I know I'm going to sound racist, so I'm not going to pick a name, but let's say it's a name you would typically associate with a black person. I would be more likely to apply, or more likely to get the job, with the white person's name than with the black person's name. People
True.
have done things like this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're true. I've seen some of the studies.
I want to apologize to Alanis here. I have an autism spectrum disorder. It's not uncommon among people who want to go into IT, although tonight I'm not feeling like I should.
You're doing
And I
fine.
don't always know when people are done speaking. Trying to improve on that, but
You're doing all right.
except for orange people. Orange people can go do something anatomically impossible to themselves. Especially people who are not naturally orange and use bronze tanner.
Into actual verifiable institutional racism at our own behest that closes doors of opportunity for them. We need less Asians in college and more black people because we don't tolerate discrimination of any kind. That's just how the racial marginalization hierarchy works. Black people...
Okay. So there is a reason why. So they're talking about the using affirmative action and how a lot of Asian people were excluded from it. And the reason why is because our immigration policies were racist. For the longest time, a lot of the black people got here because they were slaves. There was no barring for them to come here. Asian people could only come here if they had a certain amount of money. And if you had a certain amount of money and you're moving here, that means you could afford the kids to have tutors, which means that they did not end up in the same places that the freed black slaves ended up. And they had the ability to get the better teaching.
Basically, what is confusing here is an issue of class and an issue of race. Black people are typically not as well off as the Asians who come to this country, because the Asians who come to this country are generally in the upper middle to higher classes because they can afford to move, whereas the black people are descendants of people who have been here for a long time. Some of them even longer than my Pennsylvania Dutch ancestors who came over in the 1790s. And unlike my Pennsylvania Dutch ancestors who came here because they couldn't own land in Switzerland, they were often forced to come here because of... Did it just fall? Yes, my headphone just fell off. Because of tribal warfare in Africa. I mean, there's probably a lot of history here that I don't know about that I'm missing. But Asians are not really discriminated against in terms of college because they already have an advantage. Now, we could also say the Asian culture is more accepting of education than the American culture, which would also be true.
Especially the first generation that got here after their parents.
Yes, because eventually they will become more Americanized.
Mm-hmm.
Went through slavery, so they're at the top. The second rung is Muslims, which are not a race, but we treat them like one anyway. We're all...
Technically correct, Muslim is not a race. Arab, however, is what most people would consider the race of most Muslims.
And a lot of times when you're talking to bigots who are talking about Muslims, they're not thinking about white Muslim followers. They have a specific color in their head when they're talking about Muslims.
Yes, they're not liking the people the same color that Jesus was. Because your skin color isn't really hard-coded in your genetics. It's just a matter of how much sunlight your ancestors got over time.
All for female empowerment, but if we called them out on their treatment of women, we'd be Islamophobes. And Islam is...
Wait, Islam is frequently called out on its treatment of women.
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about?
It's not as called out here in America because it's not as big here in America, but people still talk about it. And yes, there has been some people who will get upset if you talk about Islam in a negative light because they feel like it could easily head into Islamophobia and such. The people still are willing to talk about it, and I'm willing to say it. I don't like how I'm being treated as a gay here in America under Christianity. I'd sure hate it a lot worse under it, some of those Muslim countries at the moment.
Speaking of which, not every Islamic country treats transgender people as badly as the U.S. government does.
I know.
Iran, for example, will help pay for surgery. It doesn't mean I want to move there, but we can't treat every Islamic country as if it were the same thing. Just like all Christian countries, they have different cultures, different laws, and different attitudes towards things, and Islam fractured into different denominations well before Christianity did in its history.
Is the only religion we respect for some reason. The third rung is Hispanics, but not all Hispanics, just immigrants, but not all immigrants, just illegal immigrants. The fourth rung is Native Americans, who we used to only give a shit about twice a year around Thanksgiving and Columbus Day, but...
Oh my gosh. Could he be any more racist there?
I'm feeling good about this because I'm on number 3 and number 4 because I've got Hispanic and Native American relatives. In fact, one of my great grandfathers was of his Latino origins, and in a bar fight he killed a man, and to keep from getting arrested he went and joined a Native American tribe. So I have ancestors who are a mixture of both. Does that put me on like number 2, equal to number 2?
I don't know. I think it puts you on the 2 bottom rungs, maybe. But then again, I don't know what this guy would think about, let's say where you would be in the social order if you were living under the Jim Crow laws back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, I don't want to find that one out.
Is one.
Sorry. Repeat that, please, because I didn't mean to start it.
I don't want to find that one out, how I'd fare under Jim Crow.
Yeah, and it's a good thing they're gone.
Yes.
Fortunately, despite his racism here, his rather blatant racism, I don't think he wants to go back to Jim Crow.
Oh, he's still got another 10 minutes. He could easily get there by then.
We're very socially conscious of them again, unless they come out against Warren's DNA test, in which case they should go back to their reservations and shut the fuck up. The fifth rung is Asian Americans, and now we're close to the bottom of the hierarchy. Asians are the highest median income earners in the United States, so they're basically white people with slanted eye holes who have IQ.
What the? No comments. No comment, because I can't think of a way to even correct him without getting called racist, because that's how racist that statement was.
That's okay. I have a snarky comment that's perfect for this guy. I bet he jacks off to anime.
Privilege, even though we don't believe in IQ. We're really sick and tired of them succeeding because it counteracts our narrative that it's impossible to succeed if you're not white, so they're dead to us. And
wait, who is saying it's impossible to succeed if they're not white? Geez, have you even taken a college course that includes the basic of statistics? Just because it may be possible for someone to succeed if they're what you would consider to be an oppressed minority doesn't mean it's impossible. They might be outliers because every statistical range will have outliers in a group. It's like Rush Limbaugh doesn't have a college education, but he's one of the richest people in the country. Most people who don't have college educations aren't doing as well as he is. And Penn and Teller even brought this up on their show, Bullshit, saying you don't need to go to college. Well, yeah, not everyone is cut out for college, but not everyone who doesn't go to college is going to do all that well in our society, and I think these headphones finally have one side that's no longer working. Let us continue.
And finally, at the very bottom of the racial hierarchy, you've got white people, scum of the earth, genocidal maniacs who have had it too acceptable for too long, whose descendants should pay for all the historical atrocities they've committed and should be ashamed of their heritage, which we don't believe even counts as a culture. All white people are...
All right, as a writer, I want to bring something up here. That was an unclear antecedent.
A what?
Unclear antecedent when he said whose descendants should pay for all the atrocities they committed. Is he saying the descendants should pay for the atrocities the ancestors committed,
Or that
or the
great-great-great-great-grandparents did?
should pay for the atrocities the descendants committed? Because in the second place, I'd agree. In the first place, well, technically, we are going to suffer from the societal effects of doing what was wrong there, and we should try to correct those as much as we can.
I thought you'd be more onto him for that really long run-on sentence.
Lara is really bad about using run-on sentences, so she really doesn't comment on that too much, but that unclear antecedent was confusing there.
Well,
I mean...
It was a very long run-on sentence as well.
But we can pick apart his grammar all day, because most of these are sentence fragments.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think he's misusing thou, but let's not pick on that too much, because it's an archaic word.
Are born racist and die racist no matter what they do, but they can maybe be forgiven for their inherent sin of being, though probably not, if they commit to being an activist for social justice their entire lives by doling out apologetic reparations to all non-white people who deserve it because they were born non-white. Gee, an organization that instills a sense of worthlessness in you from the beginning that you can only maybe surmount by subscribing to all of its beliefs and following all of its practices? I wonder what that sounds like. Commandment 3.
What does that sound like? Are you going to tell us?
I think he's implying that it's a religion.
Or are you saying, this is a fascist ideology? First off...
But fascist doesn't tell you you're worthless unless you believe in it. Fascist says you're wrong if you don't believe it. Christianity does tell you you're worthless unless you have Jesus and follow his rules.
And also, social justice is not demanding extreme nationalism. Fascism generally does involve nationalism, and of course, othering the out group, which is what you're trying to do here. Well, he's not quite trying to do it, but he's trying to say, social justice is fascist because I don't agree with it. Most people like this, and to be fair, I can't really define what social justice is. I mean, certainly, social injustice, like, let's say the redlining in Baltimore that happened shouldn't have happened. Social injustice is wrong and social justice is correcting that. But he doesn't know what social justice is.
And he's got the wrong title for Commandment 3.
Oh, what should the title be?
Why can't I use the N-word?
I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
That's what he's asking.
But if he wants to use nano, I have no problem with that.
Thou shalt perceive all differing speech as hate speech and strive to silence it. So it's clear that the social justice...
Oh, no.
I misread it, so that's not the one I was thinking. Go ahead.
This is just no. This is not what is happening. The thing is, we have a very dangerous situation in the United States right now, where people are hiding behind free speech and forgetting that all rights come with responsibilities. The alt-right loves to hide behind free speech, but they will willingly silence or try to silence anyone who disagrees with them. Their tactics, fortunately, haven't worked, but there are troll groups that belong to some of these organizations that try to commit or rather try to force people to commit suicide.
Mm-hmm. Saying I deserve to live and saying I deserve to make sure these people don't live are two totally different declarations of what rights you have, and one of them is hate speech.
This guy is what might have been called a useful idiot at one time in history. He may actually believe in free speech, and to be fair, I still believe in free speech too. But free speech is political speech. And there is a limit to it. If your free speech leads to violence against others, or you're actively directing harm to others through your speech, that's where I will draw the line. This is where I have a problem with the new independent fundamental Baptists. Even though they're trying to say, oh, we're not telling people to go out and kill the gays, they're saying to their followers to go out and have the government kill the gays, which is why it was such a problem when that pastor in Knoxville, Tennessee,
who was part of the government,
who was a cop, advocated for it. He was in a position where he could go out and kill the gays if he wanted. And unfortunately, he wasn't fired because they didn't want a lawsuit over it.
I read an interview with him afterwards. He said, well, I never let my biases ever affect how I treated people.
Of course he
If
said
you were
that.
willing to get up and yell at people that a certain group deserves to die and not even ever have a chance to go to heaven, but burn forever, I have a really hard time believing that you may not have twisted one of their arms a little harder when you put them in the cuffs.
Yes, we don't know what he did. It is possible, although difficult, for people to separate their beliefs while on the job from how they should act. But if you're in a job like police officer, which can be demanding and stressful, your rational brain isn't going to be working when you're going against some group you don't particularly like. And that might be part of the problem with police violence in the United States. It's a complex issue, and I do not want to get into that too much. I do think the police academies should try to screen out bullies and people who are going there for violence. They certainly haven't screened out white supremacists and white nationalists who have tried to take over the police forces and the military.
Justice ideology is the only true and good ideology, to the point where it's not even ideology anymore, but fact. And also it's just called being a decent human being as a means of shutting down
all right, all you decent human beings, stop being social justice warriors.
Opposition as indecent. Social justice warriors must be wary of any speech that seems to target marginalized individuals or even mention or include them at all. For example, if you hear someone say, "I was talking to this black guy at the mall recently," you must quickly jump down the throat of the person speaking and demand to know why he dared mention the race of the person in the story, even though you think race is the most important thing in the fucking world, and upon realizing that someone who is talking is black, you listen more intently to what they have to say because they're black, which means their opinion is also black, and therefore marginalized, and therefore in need of championing, because again, the duty of the social justice warrior is to coddle minorities as if they are tiny, helpless babies who can do nothing for themselves. Race.
That is one of the largest straw man I've ever seen. Does anyone have a match?
Does he ever breathe?
I don't think so. Well, if he never breathes, that explains a lot of this video, doesn't it?
Yes.
I mean, certainly it looks like there's not oxygen getting to his brain. But no, this isn't what happens. It's like, if I am talking to someone at the mall, for example, if I know their name, I'm probably not going to say they're black. I probably won't even mention their race unless it's somehow relevant. And most times it's not. What are you trying to get at here?
That he should be able to call people black because it's his way of separating him from himself, and he's sad that people will call him out on it.
Oh, right. Larry gets it. This means the social justice warriors are the real fascists. First of all, define social justice warrior. Can someone please do that?
is extremely important, except when it arbitrarily isn't. Remember that. Another aspect of this to note is that all comedy is hate speech. Jokes are oppressive forms of speech that target an item, person, or idea and lower its position in the world to raise themselves up.
Okay, wait. I put out a video once a week that is full of humor, and at no point does it use humor to put people down, and it is not hate speech. I know plenty of comedians who do that. Amy Schumer occasionally will go over the line, but a ton of her stuff will not involve putting others down and isn't racist.
Anyone else think this guy is a Ricky Gervais fan?
Oh.
Someone who routinely just mocks people for, I don't know, cheap laughs? Ricky Gervais is not that funny. People will probably give Lara hate comments for that, but really, he's not that funny. The thing is, George Carlin was funny because he was actually expressing frustrations many people had, and his rant on political correctness is nothing near this. And of course, George Carlin did not present himself as a role model for people. George Carlin was George Carlin. He was just trying to make people laugh. It seems there are a lot of people who have come after him that just think it's like, oh, political correctness is silencing free speech. Listen, I'm not silencing your free speech, unless, of course, you're causing some kind of danger to me or represent a threat. For example, just because you have the right doesn't mean you should use it. I have the right to keep and bear arms. That doesn't mean I have the right to go out and shoot people randomly on the street.
Yeah.
I have the responsibility to not fire off the gun except when it's appropriate, such as at the range or in self-defense.
You mean firing it as a 4th of July is not an appropriate time?
You can fire a firework on the 4th of July, or...
No, a gun.
I don't see why you couldn't, but...
You shouldn't.
But why would you fire a gun on the 4th of July unless you're at the range there? I mean, or out at the family cabin or something.
No,
I mean,
in Los Angeles, at least once a year at 4th, someone gets hit in the head with a bullet because people decide to shoot off their gun on the 4th of July. And if they shot it exactly at a 90-degree angle, it would be okay because it hit the terminus and then tumbled down. Except people don't do exactly straight up. They do a curve, and so a bullet will...
Yeah, it's probably not a good idea to shoot off guns indoors or in cities like that.
No.
Always know what you're pointing at, and never pull the trigger unless you're prepared to shoot a gun. If you're going to use a gun, take some gun safety courses, or at least watch some videos on YouTube.
Good videos.
Just by the way, I come from a small town. Hunting is common. A lot of people own guns. That doesn't mean I think you need to own an AK-47 that's fully automatic, like some people think. Or some people think they should have the right to own a tank.
That would help in a morning commute.
Some places it would.
Up. There is no such thing as a harmless joke because there is no such thing as a joke without a target, and targeting people is hateful and discriminatory, like targeted harassment and bullying. Jokes are the tools of tyrants, and they must be taken just as seriously. This is where deplatforming comes into play, our most trusted method of eliminating hate speech by driving it underground where we can pretend it no longer exists and fail to keep tabs on how it's developing. We believe in free.
Okay, this is actually a common tactic of Antifa, where they'll deplatform Nazis. And let's face it, most of the people who really fall under the alt-right label are Nazis because alt-right is just a politically correct way of saying neo-Nazi and white supremacist. Some other terms have come up, like race realist.
Oh, yeah.
One?
The race realist, the guy who came up with that term, he eventually left the White Storm front of website and renounced his father and the rest of his people.
In fact, if you go on my channel, you'll find me commenting on a person named the Alternative Hypothesis when he was covering a ContraPoints video. And much to my annoyance, there was far less contrapoints and more of the alternative hypothesis than I wanted. Because who wants to hear the alternative hypothesis when you can look at Natalie Wynn?
I like Natalie Wynn.
But this guy was what you would call a race realist, and he is really something. I mean, the sources he did cite were all from, like, right-wing sources that favored cops. And then when he did put a lot of his other sources in, they were just tables without any reference to them. I tried to check down below because some people do that, but he didn't have anything there. And yes, Lara is bad about sourcing things. She is trying to get better about that, too.
Speech, but ours is the only speech that is free from hate, so we're the only group it applies to. The First Amendment is only an amendment, after all, which means it didn't apply to the original Constitution, and even though the Constitution is a racist and sexist document written by racist and sexist men, we can pick and choose what we like about it to suit our needs at the time.
I'm totally lost in what he was trying to say there.
He's basically saying people cherry pick the Constitution for the things they like.
Yes, but I don't know why he added the First Amendment to how you read the Constitution.
Because he's talking about the Bill of Rights, which was not technically part of the original Constitution. The Bill of Rights was insisted upon by Thomas Jefferson to protect individual liberties. Again, he probably only knows about the free speech part of the First Amendment. There are actually 5 freedoms guaranteed in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech is one of them, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the right to peacefully assemble, and the right to petition your government for redress of grievances. But you're so focused on free speech that you forget there's more to that amendment. This guy. Go ahead.
I like the amendment that says I don't have to keep troops in my house.
Yeah, that's the Third Amendment, which actually came up in one court case during the Boston bombing.
Did it really? That recently?
That's the only time it's come up in U.S. history.
I understand why it was passed, the No Quartering Act, but just...
Yeah, the colonists did not like quartering British troops in their houses without being compensated.
Yep.
Commandment 4. Thou shalt regularly confuse the terms depiction and promotion. When a World War II movie or video game contains Nazi imagery, the excuse for its inclusion is always historical accuracy. But as social justice warriors, we know it's a racist dog whistle meant to promote Nazism in secret. That's because depiction and promotion are...
Hold on, harmonica. Citation needed.
Well, 2 years ago, or a year ago, Wolfenstein came out with all the Nazi symbols, and it wasn't the left I heard complaining about it. It was the alt-right complaining about all the Nazis being killed.
Yes, because we should respect the rights of Nazis.
But
here's the thing. Don't go out and look for violence. But if people attack you, you have the right to defend yourself. And first of all, video games. You're killing people in video games. Generally, in most video games. And actually, I'm sorry, go on.
I wasn't saying anything.
The Nazi killing in the game was actually brought up to the maker of the game, who basically said, screw Nazis, except he didn't say screw Nazis when asked about it, because he doesn't really care what Nazis think. And secondly, the original game, if you want to be true to it, is all about killing Nazis. You're an American soldier that's trapped in a German castle.
I'm trying really hard. I cannot think of a single case where someone on the left got upset that there were Nazi flags in a game, because I can't think of any game where the Nazi flag was depicted as good.
Has this guy seen The Man in the High Castle? There's tons of Nazi imagery in that, and no one's complaining about it. But that's set in an alternate history. At least I think so. The story behind it is kind of confused, and it might be more clear if I read the Philip K. Dick story on which it's based.
Oh, no, it would not be clear because Philip K. Dick's stories aren't ever clear.
Well, that could be true, too, but I'm not really sure where he's getting this. Has anyone complained that there is Nazi imagery in Wolfenstein? Or maybe Call of Duty World War II? Or even Saving Private Ryan. There was Nazi imagery in that. These films were not promoting anything about Nazi ideology. They were just trying to depict things historically accurately as possible.
I'm just doing a quick Google search. The only place I can see getting upset about Nazi flags in video games is Germany.
Well, Germany actually would get upset if they're portrayed there because it's actually against the law.
I know.
And it's a law we wrote, and for good reason.
To keep them from rebuilding back up the Nazi party.
One and the same. If you choose to depict something, you must naturally promote what it stands for, or else you wouldn't have included it. Even if you paint the Nazis in your movie as evil, and the plot is about your triumph over evil, the existence of evil itself is a rallying cry for evil people all over the world. That's why it is a firm social justice belief that movies must contain no evil.
Okay, let's talk about a movie where fascism is a major part of the plot, but what the message of the movie isn't clear. The 1999 film, Starship Troopers. It's an openly fascist society. I love the World War II propaganda, but a lot of people watch the film now and think, yeah, this is great. We want this fascist society. But really, it's trying to get you to think, it's like, what are you really signing up for here?
I thought his point back when he made that movie was like, look how effed up this society is at the moment, that they've using this kind of stuff to promote their war.
And the further they go down the fascist path, the more they become like the bugs they're fighting.
People are weird.
Well, the problem is it takes a lot to get that context. If you just watch it as a popcorn movie, which it is, it's great, it's fun, and if you don't think about it, it doesn't cause any problems. But if you have like a rise of authoritarianism, particularly authoritarian people on the right, what you get is people thinking that movie is a great thing to follow, and it wasn't. It was just, supposedly, in my mind, not supposed to be anything more than a popcorn flick.
I don't know. Voorhees, what's his name? The guy who did it. He also did RoboCop 1, and there was a lot of biting satire in there. I think he was trying to be satiric of authoritarian states.
And the thing is, there's a lot there to unpack if you're the type of person who wants to do literary and film criticism. But most people aren't going to go that deep into it.
True.
Only heroes who stand for good social justice values like diversity, inclusion, representation, and other words that are all the same shit.
Has this guy seen the character of Daniel on Fear the Walking Dead?
But here's the problem. He's saying they can only show heroes, but you can't have a hero in a movie without there being something the hero is fighting against, which in a movie world would be the evil. But he's saying you can't have evil in the world.
Or even better, have you seen the Netflix series The Punisher?
I haven't seen that one.
That is a good example of someone who is not the social justice hero you want. But the Punisher is supposed to be an anti-hero. And in the first season, he's just someone who's trying to not be the Punisher, who gets sucked back into that world. It's also trying to make some statements about our treatment of soldiers and how they have to deal with PTSD. It's not a social justice thing in any way. Neither is Jack Ryan on Amazon Prime. Oh, and going back to Daniel, you have a character who is essentially, you find out as the series goes on, the Butcher of San Salvador. You find out he has a horrible history, and he's trying to not go back into that ways. That's what makes him an interesting character, the fact that he does have this history, that he's not the social justice hero you're trying to say, that social justice people demand, because no one demands these things in films. They wouldn't make interesting characters. Characters have to have flaws. Did I just go into an unintentional criticism of how to tell stories? I think I did.
Evil is even implied off-screen by sound effects or story elements. It is a full endorsement of their existence and should result in the studios responsible being shut down permanently. Commandment 5. Thou shalt always champion diversity of race, unless it also means diversity of thought. We believe conservative...
Okay, this is a common criticism here. There is nothing wrong with most conservative thought. But conservative thought does not mean things like, let's kill all the Jews. That's wrong. And it's a good thing I'm not monetized on YouTube anyway, because I would have lost monetization for that.
And you would have lost mine too, because I'm streaming it.
Saying, okay, maybe it's a good idea to try trickle-down economics is okay. Sometimes trickle-down economics works. Saying, let's go out and, I don't know, lynch the nearest person we can find and burn a cross on their lawn isn't diversity of thought. At that point, you're just impinging on someone else's freedom to enjoy their own life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Technically, it is a diversity of thought. It's just a diversity of thought that has gone beyond thought into a...
It's gone into violence, and diversity is fine, but people's rights always end where someone else's rights begin.
Objectively said, we're almost an hour in. YouTube isn't watching anymore, so if we had said that what you said in the first 3 minutes, then we might have gotten demonetized.
Okay, but...
Oh, Miss Markey! Oh, God.
Kitty? Is there a kitty?
No, Miss Snarky said Trump has his own version of trickle down, but has nothing to do with economics.
And that must be on YouTube. That must be on your YouTube instead of mine.
Yes, it is.
Because I have Periscope and Twitch open before me, but
I
don't have the
your
YouTube
YouTube.
screen.
I think it's just doing a black screen. So after this, download it. I'll download it so you can put it on yours.
Okay, I don't really know what's going on. Streamlabs crashed on me, so that's what's wrong here, people. All right, let us continue. We should have brought Mrs. Snarky in on this.
Sexist, bigoted, and white supremacists, even the black ones, who are traitors to their own kind and not worthy of the race cards we decide when they own. When they support Trump, we call them minstrel characters dancing for their slave masters.
Who the hell has ever done that?
This guy is... You were saying that, he didn't want to go back to the Jim Crow times, but he's sure using a lot of language from that time.
I mean, yes, the minstrel shows were bad things, and they were racist. It's like there is a recording, or rather, a film version of Othello that was done in the 60s with a white actor in blackface. It does not look right. The character of Othello is black. Now, this was some famous actor, I think Laurence Olivier, who is known for his ability to do Shakespeare. But still, say you couldn't see Morgan Freeman or James Earl Jones in that role a lot better than Laurence Olivier.
Yes, he did, objectively subjective.
Hi, Maddie.
Or Black Klansmen, now that that movie's coming out. Our love, respect, admiration, and most importantly, pity for people of color extends only to people of color who vote Democrat, because the rest have been brainwashed by white oppression and have lost their...
All right, I really wish the Utah Outcast were here, just so I could see, Felicia comment on this particular line.
But wait. He's said, I don't think he knew what the movie The Black Klansman was about, because he was calling the person in that... The phrase before that is he had said they're race traitors, like the man in The Black Klansman. The Black Klansman was about a black man who used a phone and early internet techniques to get into a Klan's thing to break it down. He was not betraying his race.
I'm also pretty sure it was a comedy, so.
Yes.
Then again, I'm pretty sure, like many people criticizing these movies, they've never watched them. Like, someone who thinks The Last Jedi is a social justice warrior film. It's like, no, it's not. It's just trying to be, in many ways, The Empire Strikes Back.
I'll have to send you a link at some point. This one guy, he's talking about how much it's a social justice movie, and you know that fight between Rey and what's his name, the handsome guy who was always putting on the terrible mask.
Poe, Finn, Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, when they're fighting against the Imperial Guard, and at some point one of their weapons goes off and breaks one of the walls. He went into a 5-minute rant about how this is symbolism for a woman's birth and how much social justice was involved in just this helmet breaking through a wall.
If you're going to look for criticism, you're going to find it generally. But no, The Last Jedi was a good film. You could say there's some Marxist elements to it if you know more about Marxist philosophy than I do. But it's also understandable. Luke does have a tendency to give in to the dark side at times, or almost give in. So it makes sense that he would have tried to kill his nephew if he thought his nephew was going to be as bad as he supposedly is trying to be in the films.
Their colored souls in the process. We love people of color, but we hate Republicans more. We're also resentful of classical liberals because they won't go as far as we do, but we need their support anyway, so most of our dynamic is just pretending we're more or less extreme than we are to each other to try.
Doesn't classical liberal just mean libertarian in U.S. politics? Of course,
don't know.
Libertarian doesn't mean what it typically means in U.S. politics either. There are socialist libertarians. Noam Chomsky is one of them.
Try and preserve mutual relations while we both talk shit behind our backs. Classical liberals say outlandish things like free speech is paramount and we should engage in discussions with the other side. They're in real danger.
Alright, yes. When there is room for debate and one side might be wrong, or both sides might be wrong, by all means engage in debate and see if you can reach a compromise.
There is, and especially on like a lot of economic policies, there's room for debate. If you're bringing up a bill, people should not be forced to go under conversion therapy. There is no room for debate there.
Yeah, there's no debate. Like if you're saying torture is right, there's no debate there, and I can't believe we have even had that debate in this country. And we can't even blame Trump for that because that happened under Bush. And yet, people are still okay with what's going on at Guantanamo Bay, and people are very angry when you call the detention camps at the border concentration camps. What's that guy's name? The guy who does some more news.
Piers Morgan?
You know? No, not that guy. It's a YouTube channel. I think he's Cody something or other.
No idea.
But he said, perhaps you have people concentrated in private-run detention facilities along the border, because he was trying not to say concentration camp. Concentration camp does have a dark connotation, but we need to admit our country is doing some things that are really wrong right now.
They are.
It's not good that we have children down there that we forcibly separated from their parents that aren't getting soap and water. In fact, I just asked on Twitter if it was possible to send things like soap, toothpaste, and blankets to these children, and someone came up and said that's not allowed. Why isn't there an organization trying to do that?
They probably are. It's probably not allowed. I know a lot of prisons that already have policies like that in place.
Well, it might be a security thing, but it should also be, it's like, okay, we'll work with you to make sure these supplies are there.
Some of it's security, some of it's money. Like, for a while, there were some prisons that did not allow you to send anything but new books straight from a shipper. You know, because if you ordered it from Barnes & Noble, there was a guarantee, it doesn't have a knife hidden in it. And they went to the point where they got rid of that and only allowed the prisoners to use the prison e-book readers, which had books you had to buy even for stuff that was open, past copyright date, and you had to pay $6 to $7 for stories that would basically be free now.
First off, prisoners get exploited more than any other group in this country because they don't have any other choice. One of the most terrible industries in existence after the privatized prison industry is the prison communications industry. And what's worse about that is they're not punishing the prisoners. They're charging the families of the prisoners.
My dad, when he was in prison, I was still talking to him. It would sometimes cost me $70 for a phone call.
And that's ridiculous. People can't always afford $70. The reason I know about this is because, as an SEO content writer, I try to focus on the news, and there was a bunch of stories asking you to do stories about there were two, basically, prison communications groups that were feuding against each other. Securus Communications, and I forget the other one's name. If you listen to the Serial podcast, you probably know what it is because you've heard their particular messages in the background when they're trying to contact someone. But basically, Securus, I think, had a lawsuit against the other, and they were trying to fight against it and trying to make this one company look bad and themselves look good. Because that's what companies do, and that's what they hire writers for on the internet. Sadly, I've had to write stories that I really hated saying, oh, here's how you cure diabetes. Fortunately, I always put in, it's like, always talk to your doctor before doing this, but if you tried to say, it's like, there's no cure for diabetes, take your insulin, the people who paid for that story would say, send it back and say, no, don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's continue with this jackass.
Danger of becoming racist, sexist bigots, so we have to keep them in check at every opportunity by fiercely condemning them whenever they stray too far from our thought pack. Commandment 6. Thou shalt not settle for less than perfect character.
Alright, this one actually I do see a problem with online quite a bit. Now, I'm not perfect, I know I'm going to screw up, but when I screw up, I would appreciate it if I'm not trying to be a jackass like some people, if you would just say, hey, you kind of screwed up here, could you do this instead? Now, sometimes anger is the only response.
I don't have that problem because I'm Mary Poppins level of perfect. Practically perfect in any way.
I'm Rocket Raccoon levels of perfect.
That's not very perfect.
That's kind of the point.
Ability of a person, one lonely pineapple on a single piece of pepperoni pizza can ruin the whole pie. People do not have the...
You do not put pineapple on pizza.
I agree with you.
luxury of separating themselves into good and bad parts. They must be judged purely by their most unpleasant quality. If one part of them is terrible, all of them is terrible. So think about that the next time you decide to carelessly quote Winston Churchill or Thomas Jefferson or anyone. An apology on Twitter will not win you back our support, but it will make other people dislike you for caving to our loud emotional feelings, and since we no longer support you, we consider that a good thing. Commandment 7.
Wait, what was that? Can someone translate that into English, please?
He's saying that you can't quote people because they're not perfect. Depending on what the quote is, I would be fine with quoting Winston Churchill on how to win a war. I would not be fine quoting him on how to treat humans better.
Well, I did like his quote when he was basically being harassed by some woman when he was drunk, apparently. It's like, Madam, I may be drunk, but you're ugly, and in the morning I shall be sober. Supposedly, it's probably an urban legend. It may not actually be him, but
it's also been attributed to what's his name? The guy who wrote the story about the painting that got older and the person stayed the same.
Oscar Wilde?
Yes, it's been attributed to him.
Dorian Gray.
It's been attributed to him as well, I believe.
Oscar Wilde was known for his wit, but the thing is, no one's perfect. And yes, there does seem to be a call-out culture, particularly on Tumblr, that is particularly toxic. But if you notice this, there's a similar culture on YouTube among the highly right-wing figures, where if you stray from their right-wing ideology, they don't like you very much.
True.
And once again, it comes down to people being tribal apes. By the way, I'm not trying to denigrate anyone with that, but we are apes. All of us. Biologically, we are apes.
I think we're denigrating the apes by saying that.
Thou shalt endeavor to erase all unpleasant history from modern minds.
Oh, good God.
What the?
Erase all... Go ahead, sorry.
That's the total opposite of what... That's
Of
why that you were just talking about in your last point where you said, don't quote Thomas Jefferson or don't quote Winston Churchill because they have bad... If we're bringing that stuff up, it's pretty obvious that we're not erasing history. But he's probably going to talk about getting rid of Confederate monuments.
In fact, he is. But getting rid of these monuments is not erasing all unpleasant history. These monuments were put up during the Jim Crow era to remind people of what the South was and what it fought for. Now, you can say it was states' rights, and you can say the North did not start the war to end slavery, which might be true. But the fact is, slavery was a major sticking point during the Civil War, and the states' rights the South specifically wanted, because it was important to their economy, was to own slaves.
I live in Lee County, and yes, it's named after him. No, he was never here. He never came here during his lifetime. They have a monument of him put up in the 60s, the exact same year, right after local court ordered that they did have to integrate the schools.
Yes, that's probably... What state? Oh, you live in Florida, don't you?
Yep.
I was going to say, I thought Florida had a slightly different history during the Civil War.
Parts of it, but this is Lee County. Hi, Lisa. And yes, they put it up the exact same year, right after a court ruling saying, yes, you have to let the black people into the school.
Then I was surprised to find out Kentucky was not part of the Confederacy.
It wasn't?
Nope.
That is surprising.
Our country's history is shameful. None know that better than us social justice warriors. We weaponize it against objects of our disdain all the time, namely white people, concerning slavery. But we also want physical reminders of our past to go away, like Confederate...
We want physical reminders of our past to go away? Who wants physical reminders of our past to go away? I, for one...
He's talking about Confederate statues.
I, for one, want Gettysburg to stay there. It's an important part of our history. I don't even mind the fact that Lee has a memorial, I think, outside Arlington. He donated it, and I think Lee could be seen as a symbol of grace and defeat. That doesn't mean what he stood for was a good thing, and if you're putting up statues in the South to remind Southerners that the whites are better than the blacks, essentially, and the races shouldn't be mixed, and every other racist stereotype for Southerners you can think of, maybe it's a good idea to take those statues down, or at least put up plaques telling people why these statues were put up in the first place. Did I go into a rant? I think I did.
Statues and monuments, so nobody is unnecessarily triggered by inescapable history. We want the historically marginalized people of our country to be able to be proud Americans, and the only way to achieve that is for us warriors to wipe the slate clean.
All right. Being a proud American does not require you to... All right, the main problem with this commandment here is that he's got it backwards. No one wants unpleasant history to be erased from modern minds. What he is trying to say, even though he doesn't realize it, is that the... What was that? Good grief, I forgot what I was trying to say. Is that we shouldn't celebrate history that was immoral and wrong. A lot of what the South did was wrong. A lot of what Sherman did during the Civil War was worthy of criticism.
Yes, yes.
But then again, it was the Civil War, and civil wars generally are nasty because First of all, the divisions that have caused the war are deep within the culture by that point, and of course they have the highest casualty numbers because it's fellow countrymen fighting each other.
And also because it wouldn't be good irony if there was civil war and they were nice to each other.
Gain complete control of the government at all levels, and turn the entire system on its ass in a way that will completely destabilize everything and run our nation into the ground. Simple. Only from the ashes can we rebuild a nation of true equality after banishing about half the white people to other countries to do away with any large group majority.
Who is saying that?
I've only heard one group talk about putting people out of the country, and it was not the liberals. They would rhyme with home front or storm front. Oh, that didn't even rhyme. That's their name.
One of the people on my private Twitter feed that really has a lot of people I shouldn't be following on it was a former Stormfront moderator who just said, you know what, I'm not putting up with this anymore. These people are not what I stand for. They're racist, and part of it was he just realized he was bisexual and they didn't like him for that.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's trying to erase the history. We want people to know the history, regardless of what political side of the spectrum they're on. Because people who can't recognize patterns will repeat them, and generally people who can recognize the patterns are doomed to repeat them anyway because of the people who don't. Have you looked at American politics in the last 4 years?
I'd rather not.
Now, unfortunately, this guy probably has the privilege, yes, the privilege, of being able to ignore politics because he's not a member of a marginalized group. And yes, you're problematic. There, I said it.
They'll be fine. They're privileged wherever they are, especially in North Korea and the Middle East. This erasure principle...
That is not how privilege works. Sorry, I had to interrupt it. It's like, if you go to a non-majority white nation, you won't have white privilege anymore.
Also applies to old television shows that were evocative of their time, but not properly diverse or PC enough for our new modern standards of thought, which is why we must reboot franchise after franchise, like Thomas the Tank Engine, with more current PC culture to appeal to children who care so much about that stuff.
I can't wait for the alt-right version of Thomas the Tank Engine for one. That'll be great.
Wasn't Thomas the Tank Engine a dystopian future?
I have no idea. I mean, some of this guy's comments would be like suddenly finding out Mr. Rogers was a pedophile.
Hello, neighbors.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't be surprised by it, but still, it would be disturbing.
It would.
It's why we must denounce so-called classic Disney movies like Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, and The Little Mermaid for depicting,
Who has... That's not the one that people renounce. It's the one that even Disney says, you know, it's a little bit bad that we made this one about Happy Slave.
Well, to be fair, Song of the South really isn't about racism, or its absence from the U.S. isn't about racism. It's a copyright issue that's complicated.
Oh,
and
really?
Yeah. Song of the South is actually going through a lot of African-American folk tales told by basically an Uncle Tom character, which is why people think it's racist. But it's like telling the stories of Brer Rabbit. It's cartoon and live action mixed, and the Crows really are pretty racist.
And Dumbo, yeah.
I just found out today their names were the Jim Crows. From the Utah Outcasts.
Well, I bet you won't be surprised to find out that the guy who wrote the stories in Song of the South was white. He learned them all from his black, at the time it wasn't enslaved, just, you know, black house workers. And he wrote them all down and then made money off of them.
Well, they're actually pretty common folk tales that are in it, or like the stories of Brer Rabbit.
promoting gender roles and non-feminist propaganda, rather than the new instant classics like Frozen that people definitely still give us.
Let it go. Let it go. Can't hold it back anymore. Sorry.
Second thought about. Commandment 8. Thou shalt take to the streets whenever possible to disrupt the lives of thine enemies.
All right, I want to go back to something mostly because The Little Mermaid has been in the news lately because people can't handle a black Ariel. People, really, just let it go. It's a story about a mermaid who turns into sea foam at the end, but Disney bright-washed the story.
Remember, she said Ariel, not Areola.
I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Because of our classification of all other groups of thought as racist, sexist, etc., it's very easy for us to strip these people of their inherent humanity, and we should, because what they believe is inhuman and wrong.
All right, I don't necessarily approve of people going to protest to look for violence. If you're going with a baton, baseball bat, or even a stun gun, you are probably someone who shouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand where Antifa is coming from this. Antifa thinks fascists are inherently violent, which is why there were clashes at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. And of course, Heather Heyer's death kind of proved Antifa right. But a lot of what Antifa does and other anti-fascist groups do is actually try to combat fascism. The thing is, fascists tend to be sneaky. And they will use people like Sargon of Akkad to try to spread their ideas. And if you have something like the YouTube algorithm, by the way, there's a video about how that's causing the polarization of American politics on my channel if you want to check it out.
Oh, I need to.
That if you only look for right-wing content, it'll show you right-wing content exclusively, and some of that content gets more and more extreme. Facebook and, to a lesser extent, Twitter also do this. Supposedly, it's good for their business, but what it also does is you only get one side.
Yep.
People will go back to the fairness doctrine of the 1980s and say that started this, but in the 1980s, you still could watch like the mainstream press and listen to Rush Limbaugh and get basically both sides of where US politics were.
Wrong, like capitalism, for instance. I mean, how many poor people have to die on the streets before they realize that the only way to end poverty is for all of us to be dirt poor and dying on the streets? It would certainly eliminate inequality.
That is not socialism.
That's not even what the argument is. Do we really have to go through a brief introduction to the problem of income inequality? I think we might. Income inequality basically means that people at the lower rungs have fewer resources to meet their needs. If you also have the people at the higher rungs raising prices, when wages are not going up and have remained stagnant, what you will have is people with even less buying power. As someone who has lived in poverty all of my adult life, according to the US poverty figures, it's not great. I mean, there have been times when I've had to beg people for money to buy things like socks. Maybe you should try living like that guy. Maybe you do, I don't know. But what people want to do when they talk about ending poverty is to make sure the wealth is distributed more fairly. And one of the ways to do that, yes, is high taxation. It's not the only way, and perhaps instead of saying let the rich keep their money, you should find ways to keep the medium of exchange in circulation, which is what money is meant for.
I think too many of them are trying to recreate DuckTales and swim in the bank vault.
Well, yes, but even Scrooge McDuck believed in treating his workers fairly. Don't you remember one episode where his nephews tried to create a privilege of working for us tax, and he's like, I never told you to cheat anyone.
Don't remember that one, but
it was the original DuckTales, and he is displeased with his nephews doing that.
With that, our ultimate goal is for everyone in America to have the same size tombstone. Anyway, because our...
Wait, what? I don't care what size my tombstone is. Unless you're talking about pizza, in which case I fear deeply. But the thing is, my tombstone will only have me underneath it when I'm dead. I can't imagine that even if I have a spirit, I'm going to care about where my body is.
I might if I die in like a subway bathroom.
Okay, yeah, it would be terrible if you have to like haunt a subway bathroom and like in Fallout for all eternity, but
Yeah.
fortunately Fallout is fiction.
Our enemies are basically demons in flesh suits. We can hound and harass them ad nauseum.
All right, you heard that. Get out your demon suits.
No, flesh suits.
Oh wait, he said the other side are demons in flesh suits. My bad.
Lots and lots and lots of nauseum without feeling a shred of remorse. These people dare sit at the top of a man-made hierarchy system that existed long before humans and
Did he just go full lobster?
Wait, how does a man-made hierarchy system exist before humans?
I missed that. That's a good question. Does he mean we created it before Homo sapiens came about? Possibly. I mean, social species tend to have hierarchies. But even anarchists only want to get rid of the unjust hierarchies. Some hierarchies can come about naturally, like the lobster, whichever Jordan Peterson goes on about. Seriously, I have a hard time understanding Jordan Peterson, because if you go through his stuff, you realize he's not saying anything really deep. It's basic stuff.
He's like, did you ever see that movie, I forgot the name. Mystery Men.
Yes, I love that movie.
And he had the Sphinx, who was terribly mysterious. But towards the end, Mr. Farius figured out he's not very mysterious. He just says stuff that sounds mysterious.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I believe Mr. Furious eventually finds out he really does have super strength when he's angry.
But yes, but the Sphinx isn't mysterious. He just says stuff that's mysterious. Like you don't take the mountain to Muhammad. You take Muhammad to the mountain.
That's not mysterious. That's pretty obvious.
Yes.
But no, Jordan Peterson is just so verbose because his vocabulary is very good. Let's admit that he can say very simple things in a very complicated way. Now, if you've been trained as a writer in any form, even journalistic, you know not to use a big word where a small one will suffice because you want people to understand you. What Jordan Peterson wants to do is sound smart by saying simple things, and that's partly why he has such a following. Secondly, he really is a father figure to a lot of people who Peterson wants to do is sound smart by saying, but what does this have to do with taking to the streets to disrupt the lives of thine enemies? I also don't think that's how thine is supposed to be used. Now, again, this seems to be a criticism of Antifa, specifically, and not just social justice warriors. Here's a hint, guy. Not every social justice warrior is a member of Antifa.
Implement policies we don't agree with? We've killed people for less. We have killed people for less.
Name one instance of a Tumblr social justice warrior killing anyone.
I wouldn't bet a bit against it. Have you seen some of the people on Tumblr?
Yes, I have. And I'd be more afraid of the porn people that used to be on Tumblr than the social justice people.
And when we're not killing people for less, we're simply vividly fantasizing about killing them for less. So of course these subhuman monsters spawned from the pits of hell don't deserve a moment of peace. Whether it's at a restaurant or their own homes, it is our civic duty as political...
Okay, I have no problem with people giving Sarah Huckabee Sanders a hard time for what she did, or whoever it was in the Trump administration. That is an active political protest. It's not discrimination because she's a member of some group she can't control. She was deliberately lying for Trump. Or was it Jeff Sessions? It was one of those two.
It was Sarah Huckabee, I believe.
She did the right thing by stepping down. But here's the thing. I think she enjoyed her job while working for Trump.
Lemmings to follow our brothers and sisters off intellectual cliffs and scream at the top of our lungs.
Lemmings don't jump off cliffs.
That's where I was going. That comes from a Disney film where the director just ran the lemmings off cliffs because he couldn't do anything else with them.
Yes, I'm sorry objectively if you find out that that one was fake.
While we hold signs we made in college for class credit, protesting helps.
Seriously, I didn't even use a pencil in college very much. What makes you think I'm holding a sign? All right, I was an IT major, so I used the keyboard mostly, so...
I didn't get any... The only time I made anything close to a sign was I had to draw a cannon on a big piece of paper for underwater archaeology. I don't think it was a protest.
Now, maybe you can take some courses that require you to do some type of community service. Like I was told at Ivy Tech to take public speaking in the summer, because then you don't have to do community service to pass the class, because it's only an 8-week class.
Oh, good idea.
And that's when I took it.
Us graduate, getting arrested for it makes our resumes look better. Look that shit up because it's real.
Having a record does not make your resumes look better, and no one's going to put an arrest on their resume. The corporate world is still the corporate world. HR departments of corporations don't want to see someone has an arrest record. There is a reason why Illinois, for example, has laws that say you cannot ask about a person's conviction records. This guy is just something else.
Amy Schumer and Emily what's-her-last-name are heroes because...
Emily who?
I don't know which Emily he's talking about.
Neither do I.
While they were protesting Brett Kavanaugh, the police asked them if they wanted to be arrested, and they said yes. And then they sat on the fucking floor with twist ties on their hands like the martyrs they are.
And once again, civil disobedience is a common form of political protest, and that's what that was.
Miss Snarky is guessing Emily Watson.
Okay, yes, that sounds about right. Brett Kavanaugh... Well, Lara probably has some violent thoughts about what can happen to Brett Kavanaugh, but she's not going to express them. Lara also occasionally thinks that one of the problems with society is that we don't drink enough blood from the skulls of our enemies anymore.
Wait,
However,
there's a reason for that.
Yes, it's unsanitary. You need to...
No. Skulls don't hold very much blood because they got these two big holes right here.
Well, that's why you put a bowl in the... Anyway, I'm not taking to the streets to disrupt the lives of my enemies, because I have better things to do, like comment on YouTube videos and do a duet of Suicide is Painless later, which we have to do because Lara run that poll and not enough people voted no. And by the way, there is not going to be a concert featuring Alanis, I, and the Godless Engineer if Alanis and I get 1,000 followers, although I do think the Godless Engineer would be in on that. So let's continue with the video.
And those are the 8 commandments of the social justice warrior. 10 would have had a nicer ring to it, but I ran out of ideas. Subscribe to the channel.
You hack.
For more videos, follow me on Twitter at Sunburned Albino, and you can support the channel on Patreon at patreon.com/sunburned.
I'll get right on that. I'll be doing that right away.
I do have to admit Sunburned Albino is a cool name.
It is.
But now everyone watching on Alanis' channel, I'm sorry Streamlabs crashed on me, and apparently Restream was doing something, so I couldn't do it through Ready and Relive either. But I will be streaming later if my roommate doesn't need to go to bed. Now we're going to do what everyone came here for. We all know you're waiting for this. But I don't have any rhythm. Hold on, I have my...
I don't think we stayed on time with each other.
I told everyone it was a bad idea, but...
Who do you think
I
the
even
one?
said it.
Who do you think the one no vote was?
There's a cat back there.
Yes, there is.
I mean, I told everyone it was a bad idea to vote no, but I even said it's like, have you heard me play the harmonica? It's about as good as Godless Engineer on the ukulele.
Well, thank you everyone for coming on. If you're not already subscribed to me or the Sinister,
Porpoise.
I'm going to call you the left porpoise, but no, a Sinister porpoise. Be sure to do so. You have anything coming up in the near future?
Well, actually, I did get my website back up and running. It's not actually, the directory structure is still a little screwed up, but I'll get that fixed. It's sinisterporpoise.com, where I'll be doing blogs about LGBT news, views, and opinions. Also, after this, I'm probably going to be streaming either 7 Days to Die or Borderlands 2. Probably She Will Be 2, but we don't have compatible systems because I play Borderlands 2 on the PC and she plays on the PS4. So, actually, I don't know if Alanis has a Patreon.
I do have a Patreon, I just never set it up, so I don't have enough people yet. But what I got coming up is next week, tomorrow, I'll be releasing my weekly video. It's about trans suicide, so if that's something that triggers you, you might not want to watch. It's unusual for me, there's no humor or anything else like that in the video.
Oh, and tomorrow, just because I might as well push it at this point because he's irritating, I'll be doing a live stream covering the latest video from the objectively terrible human being, Noelle Plum. All right, good night, everyone, and I will try to download this from Alanis' channel because it didn't quite work on mine, and I still don't know why Streamlabs crashed the way it did.
Okay, everyone have a good night.
And so long, and thanks for all the fish.